Hi, thanks for making the time to hear this presentation. Over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to share with you my reflections on the creative processes we've shared together over the last 6 weeks. I will cover my assumptions and prior understanding of creativity and the creative process, the theories and models that have resonated with me throughout the journey, a reflection on the creative experiences I've had and how this has impacted my prior assumptions, and the insights that I have gained that can be applied to the business context. Starting with assumptions and prior understandings. The first is that creative ideas are new. To be creative, you must come up with something that hasn't been thought of before, a novel concept not yet considered. The second is that the meaning of creativity in a business context is in fact problem solving, and creative people in business are good problem solvers. The third is around skill, and that creativity is an expression of a skill, either a natural talent or something which has been learnt, or a combination of both, and that creative expression must demonstrate skill in an unusual and unpredictable way. I also had some prior assumptions about me and creativity. The first being that it takes time. Creativity cannot be commanded. It takes time and effort to come up with good ideas. The second is that it's easier in a team. I often find being creative on demand difficult, and I assumed that it would be easier to be creative with a group to bounce off. Jumping into the theoretical understanding of creativity first. Campbell's theory supposes that creativity is Darwinian in nature. He presents an argument that knowledge, and by extension creative thought, is developed for the purpose of ensuring survival. He states, problem solving undertaken with one fixed goal in mind overlooks the opportunistic, serendipitous course of organic evolution and much of creative thinking. Essentially, creativity is the product of trial and error, and the individual or group has little control. Now, this really challenged my prior assumptions around creativity as problem solving and created a question about how I was going to be creative if I had to wait for it to spontaneously hit me. Additionally, it confirmed that my view that the creative process would take time. The creative problem-solving profile sets out 4 steps that supports teams to identify problems and generate solutions which can then be optimized and implemented. Importantly, it's not reliant on any genetic predisposition as Campbell presents. The advantage of this model is its commercial application. This asks the user to define problems and create theoretical models and ideas to explain them. The result is a well-analysed problem and a clearly defined issue that can then be used to develop and evaluate ideas and practical solutions. This then validated my assumptions around problem solving and creativity. The final piece of research I explored was something you pointed me towards, Michael, the work of Amabile. While the body of work is vast, I honed in on her ideas around people who compose the creative problem-solving team. She believes that creativity is at the intersect of domain-relevant skills, that is expertise, creativity-relevant skills, and intrinsic task motivation. So basically this means problems cannot be solved without the right people in the room. One point which stayed with me was that of intrinsic motivation. Amabile believes that intrinsic motivation is a key contributor to creative idea generation and is in fact, in some ways, the most important. The theory here validated 2 of my assumptions. 1, that skill was critical, and 2, that approaching creativity in a team would be easier. Jumping now into the creative experiences I've been exposed to over the last 6 weeks. Our first creative venture together was the seat project, where we were required to build and decorate a stool. The team collaborated well, and we kept things simple, where we were motivated by a common vision of donating the seat to a Vietnamese children's refuge. What I quickly noticed about myself is that I jumped into ideas before establishing parameters. I focused on the use of materials at hand. My idea seen here is using the leftover dowel to paint the dots. The team were eager to bring me back to the noticing and asking why, really why, phases of the creativity cascade before moving on to execute the idea. We then visited the Museum of Contemporary Art, and I want to highlight a few pieces that inspired my creative practice. At a distance, these bronze balloons appeared to be 3 mice to me, huddled in a corner by that brick wall. This alerted me to the role of the curator and the layers of meaning they have the power to impose upon a work and your understanding of it. The ephemeral nature and multiple dimensions of this piece struck me also. The artwork on the music stand is set to inspire a musician to play, making this a performance piece, yet we're left with the stands alone as an installation artwork in its own right. I was also fortunate enough to see a group of school children perform in this space as well. And finally, this piece really struck me in its framing. The shop front draws the viewer in and creates a different perspective of the work. We then worked on our group installation piece, Confessions to Naked Ned. We followed the creative problem-solving profile to the T, particularly in regards to identifying ideas, selecting options, evaluating those options, and then implementing. This is where I saw our team really come into its own, was the implementation stage, where we worked together quite well and made some of our most effective decisions within that really tight parameters timeframe of the final Sunday. Confessions to Naked Ned was incredibly well received by the audience. From entering the building and being drawn in by the fabric hanging from the balcony, engaging with the materials and confessing sins, and then binding those sins to the mannequin, the audience viewed the work, engaged with the work, and returned to view it again. I've also been reflecting on the application of creativity in other aspects of my life, and the one that comes to mind is my 87-year-old grandfather. A fitter and turner by trade, later to become a farmer, he's never one to shy away from a creative problem-solving challenge. A couple of examples: his answer to the outdoor Ugg boot with a reinforced heel, the washing basket trolley so you don't have to bend down when putting out the washing, and his answer to the Ab Swing Pro, which he saw on infomercials. I've also tested the brainstorming of the problem itself in the workplace, the generating of ideas from multiple people, and the selecting and evaluating of those ideas. So how have these experiences challenged my initial 5 assumptions about creativity and about myself? Well, I reject the idea that ideas must be new in order to be creative. In most cases, the ideas generated through this subject were appropriation of existing ideas. In all cases, a problem was solved, no matter how different it was. While skill was not essential in achieving an outcome, I can't help but think it would be helpful in achieving a more effective outcome. When applying processes and models to the creative process, it really doesn't take as long as I anticipated. In terms of the ease of the teamwork, well, this really varied from project to project. As a team, I think we performed best when there was a time limit on us, the Sunday of the group installation, for example. And this is about establishing the parameters and being clear on our parameters. We struggled most when asking why, really why, and I think the reason behind this was a lack of shared intrinsic motivation as to what we were doing. Finally, I'd like to share with you the insights I've gained through this process that can be applied to the business setting. The first is intrinsic motivation. The creative idea generation process needs to be entered into by individuals with an intrinsic motivation to do the task. When an individual finds the task fundamentally interesting, they're increasingly motivated to solve the problem. Critical actions for me are to appoint the right team to the right project and consider having the customer in the room when generating ideas. The second is the power of constraints and a well-defined problem. When parameters are placed around a project, it encourages team members to come up with ideas which they would not have generated without them. This dichotomy plays out in business frequently, as the feasibility of an idea is a key component in assessing its creativity. Actions for me are to have a shared understanding of the parameters around any new project, and to use those parameters as a benchmark for success. The final application to business that I want to highlight is the curation of messages. I learned at the MCA the key role of the curator in creating meaning, and I saw this play out in our installation. The inner city location, the community venue, coupled with the colours of the sins being synonymous with gay pride, lent to a very different meaning. This is a critical learning for businesses. It's not just our words or just our actions alone which create meaning. It's the entire context in which we operate. Actions to consider here are mindful leadership and the power of role modelling. That concludes my presentation today. Thank you for a very interesting and stimulating unit and the opportunity to present these reflections. I look forward to hearing your feedback.